the term epistle side and gospel side. You're about to get a whole lot more information than you ever wanted to know. Until the early 1960s, but actually in the late 1950s in this congregation, the altar was up against the wall. There was no space for the priest between the wall and the altar, which meant that the priest celebrated with his back to the people. And they used a combination of two things. One was a book called the Missal, spelled M-I-S-S-A-L, not L-E. A missal is a book that is essentially the book that the priest can read the service from. In our case, here at Ascension, they used a book called the Anglican Missal, which is essentially the 1928 prayer book, expanded a little bit. But whether it was the 1928 prayer book or the Missal, the one feature that the Missal had and the 1928 prayer book altar service had was the lessons printed in them. And so, needless to say, the Missal stood on the Missal stand. And the service began with the Missal and the Missal stand on this side. And because, this makes no sense, because occasionally the lessons were from the Old Testament, but nevertheless, the first lesson read, and by the way, no lay readers, no lectors, the priest did the whole thing. The first lesson read was called the Epistle. But because the ritual said you don't turn a quarter turn, you always turn a full turn, after the priest read the Epistle, then the priest had to turn back, but couldn't turn this way, so the priest would turn this way, which meant that the gospel was read from the middle. The epistle was read by the priest over here, then the gospel was read from the middle, and then the priest had to turn back over here. So that meant the acolyte came in the middle of it all and unobtrusively shifted the missal stand to the other side. Okay? Which led some people to believe that this was the epistle side of the church, and that this was the gospel side of the church. In fact, this is the south side and this is the north side. But you know, if some is good, more is better when it comes to tradition. And so little sayings sort of crept in that, of course, had no basis in fact. One of which was, well, you cannot read the gospel without the epistle having been read. So therefore, the epistle side candles had to be lit first. And then the gospel side candles would be lit. And then when they were unlit, or extinguished, I guess, the gospel side would be extinguished first, and then the epistle side. None of this has any real bearing anymore, because we read the lessons all over the place, right? So in some respects, the gospel side now is in the middle of the church. The epistle side is wherever we read the epistle from. But tradition being one of those things, well, we've always done it this way. Even if we don't do it this way anymore, we still always do it this way. Missal stand, missal. Today we use the altar service book. Okay. Walk in love as Christ loved us.